Hello, nonverbal communication students. It's Ivy one more time. Well, a few more times, but just one more time right now. There you go. Good to be with you. I am looking at the last part of chapter 11. I'm feeling a sneeze coming on. Well, that was a little crazy, but very human. So, what are you going to do? You got to sneeze, you got to sneeze. I'm at my home by myself, so I don't have to have my mask or my shield on or whatever. That would have been disgusting. So anyway, we're looking at chapter 11, the last part of chapter 11. I do want to draw your attention to something before we get to the last part of chapter 11, which is nonverbal communication cues in educational settings, which you're all very familiar with. But there is a section on emotional intelligence on page 403. Emotional intelligence, to me, I've always thought of it as being really, really adept at reading and interpreting accurately nonverbal cues. It's more than that. I haven't studied it much in depth. It really has come from other disciplines and not communication. But it's in there. It may be something that you have studied or you hear about in other classes. And so there's a section in there. Take a look if you get a chance. The section on nonverbal communication cues and educational context begins on 404, and we start with environment, the classroom environment. And again, given all the strangeness of how we are delivering university instruction these days, classroom environment means a lot of different things. Some of the classrooms on our campus, there's so many different ones, okay, and so many different configurations. So we have to think about how that affects the teaching and learning process, just the physical setting within which our instruction occurs. And so it's quite different if you are in one of those U-shaped lecture halls, particularly if you have classes in Bay Hall, or maybe in the engineering building, in the Robert Ferguson Engineering Building. He was president when I was first hired. Wonderful gentleman. Or if you are in some kind of a lab, or if you're in some of the rooms like in Islander Hall, where we're all in these little tables and we're spread out, and there's the plexiglass, which is a fairly new innovation that we have had to do because of the times we're living in. Or if you're in like a small lab kind of a room, or if you're in O'Connor looks to me, a lot of those rooms look to me, somebody told me this, I can't remember who told me, so I'll quote somebody, that O'Connor looks like a spreadsheet. It is sort of, quote unquote, the business building, although none of the buildings belong to any particular colleges or disciplines, but I don't love teaching in O'Connor. It's a lot of looking at backs of heads, whether you're spaced out 6 feet, for social distancing or not. So that's not my favorite space. But anyway, the environment within which instruction takes place matters a lot. So that's the section that we begin on 404, talking about from the sunshine room to the lecture hall. Some of y'all know that I studied at Oxford. I was able to study C.S. Lewis and communication at Oxford University in Oxford, England, back in 2013. Took 2 postdoctoral courses in C.S. Lewis and communication. Some of y'all probably love Lewis, maybe through the Narnia Chronicles. Anyway, I will never forget my classroom at St. Hilda's College at Oxford University. Unlike anything else, fireplace at one end, beautiful sconces and candelabras, and huge, long, conference table, and bay window off to the right with the shutters open because hey, it was England and there's no bugs in England. So I'll never forget the look of that room plus that whole experience. But now with more online learning environments and distance education, and boy, we all got thrust into that whether we were online teachers or not. Spring of 2020 pushed all of us into online education. My teaching and my students had to experience it as well. Some of y'all love it, some of y'all really hate it. Some of y'all feel like online learning is good for certain kinds of subjects but not for others. Many of my communication students really don't love it because they like communicating and face-to-face, and they like being in classrooms and hearing discussions. So a lot of these things are changing. We know that. So pay attention to some of those nonverbal cues connected to online learning because they are there. They're just mediated by technology, right? We start talking about teacher nonverbal immediacy on page 406. This has been studied a ton in the communication discipline and in other disciplines, but boy, we study it a lot. These are the verbal and nonverbal ways that teachers reduce psychological distance with their students and enable them to learn more effectively. We're mostly interested in the nonverbal cues, and so there's teacher immediacy nonverbal cues listed on page 407. Some of it is the way you use a classroom, the way you space yourself from your students, tone of voice, eye contact, facial animation, all of those things. Again, those are mediated right now or sort of interfered with right now because we're having to do such distance from each other. That's very unusual. It's very hard to get used to. So I am usually way out in the classroom and I'm moving around and I reduce the physical distance, not just the psychological distance with me and my students. I have found it very constraining to not be able to do that and to have to be at such a distance, particularly in office hours. That's when it's really weird. And so I've had very few students come by physically for office hours on Mondays and Wednesdays. And when they do, they stay almost like to the door in a chair, and we're both in masks. And we're coping. We're doing the best we can. But I look forward to when I am not having to do that any longer. And can be more my nonverbal self in my profession, my chosen profession. We have a section on teacher appearance and attire on page 409. There's some research that says teachers who are perceived to be more physically attractive get higher student ratings on their teaching evaluations. I may not like that, but that's kind of the way the thing goes sometimes, and so you got to think about that. The section that may interest you the most starts on page 410, and it's student nonverbal communication. There are a lot of nonverbals. You know, if I've got a class of 35, you're bombarding me with a nonverbal communication when I'm up there and doing my thing. And so I'm trying to read your facial expressions to see if you're bored, if you're catching what I'm saying, if you're following me, if you're interested, if you have something you want to say. I'm trying to read all that nonverbal while I am doing my communication job as well. Page 411 talks about student misbehaviors. Now that may sound very grammar school, very elementary to you, but there is a long line of research on verbal and nonverbal communication that is considered misbehavior by students. If I notice them, I do not like people being on their headphones while I am teaching and other students are discussing things. I find it rude, actually. So you know, I don't know if they're turned on or turned off or whatever. You're just used to them hanging on your ears. I actually observed a teacher on this campus last year, and a student right up in front, center, right in the classroom. It's sort of a small lecture hall. Had the big can earphones. It wasn't just the little, white wireless ones. It was this whole big headset, and he was right in front of the teacher. And I was like, "Are you going to ask him to get off his headphones so he can actually listen to you?" He was present in body only. I don't think his mind was engaged, and he was probably listening to his tunes or a podcast or something. But that does not go over well with a lot of us. We also have a thing that's called student leave-taking behavior. Sometimes students will sort of try to punctuate a class or sort of assert their will into a class by packing up their stuff whenever they want to pack it up. And the instructor is really the one who says when people leave a classroom or when a class is over. But sometimes students start doing that and try to send signals to a professor like, "Hey, wrap it up." And usually we do not handle that very well. I realize professors sometimes go long. They go overtime, and that causes you issues getting to the next class or to go get something to eat or to get to a job or wherever you need to go. But look at that section on student misbehaviors. You might find that kind of interesting and maybe kind of irritating. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. There's a little bit more in this chapter, but I'm going to stop right there and close off with you on chapter 11. And I will move on. We have one more chapter to cover in these video lectures. I hope they help you. They're fun to do, but I hope they help somehow, particularly if you are in an online situation and you lose access to me in the classroom. All right, y'all. Take care. More later. Bye.